Hey, folks, for episode number 83 of the Rental Roundtable, we had on a repeat guest, Don Hundley. He's the founder and CEO of Iron Pulse. He does marketing and growth for equipment rental companies. He's got dozens of customers across the country currently. He's previously on episode 37, if you want to give that a listen. The number one thing we hear talking to rental companies every day is how do we grow revenue going into 2026? And this whole episode was around that with Don today. So, what are some basic blocking and tackling you can do to continue to grow going into next year, and some of the trick plays you can run as well? So, love Don, really big fan of what he does here for the industry. And if you think about growth for 2026, I think you'll enjoy the episode. All right, everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 83. We have on a familiar face, Don Hundley, founder and CEO of Iron Pulse Solutions. Don, welcome back to the show today.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm honored to be a repeat. Thank you.
How many people get the call back? It's a big honor, Don. You put it at the top of your resume. You were on for episode number 37 early this year. We heard your longer story around how you got started with Iron Pulse. Definitely encourage people to go listen to that. For today's topic, something that I hear a lot is around growth for 2026. Well, we had folks at the ARA Young Professional event a few weeks ago, and the number one challenge and focus area for rental companies in that room going to next year is growth. How do we grow revenue, right? And we hear about it a lot. People ask us about marketing, and your name has come up, Don, a lot. You've become a good friend, and given how common this topic is, and how do you grow, and how do you use marketing to grow in 2026, I felt like it was very timely to have an episode as we finish the year, going to next year, thinking about very tactically putting together a marketing plan for next year. So. You're back by popular demand here today, Don. So
very, very honored. Thank you. And I put up my Christmas tree just for that occasion. So appreciate that.
yes, and the star on
My
top.
daughter and wife. Yep. They decorated that for me. They said, hey, it's got to be on. So here we are.
There you go. I love it. Well, so Don, real quick, 30 seconds on Iron Pulse Solutions, just folks don't know, and then I want to hear about how we're thinking about marketing going into next year.
Yep, good deal. Appreciate it, Kyle. Thanks for what you're doing for the industry, first of all. Don Hundley, Iron Pulse, been in the industry about 12 years now. Started at a startup rental company that grew very large over the tenure that I was there and continued to be successful. And, went over to a manufacturer for about 3 years, learned what was behind the curtain when it comes to the OEM side. And about 2 years ago, started Iron Pulse just to work with independent rental companies and dealerships on their marketing. Turns out most of the conversations are around fleet mix and around what they're doing on a daily basis to provide the customer service. How do they do that? How do they reach out to them? How do we get into the markets to where there's new customers that we don't know about? There's a lot of different things that, come into play when it comes to marketing, and having those conversations on a daily basis with folks all around the country really give me a good idea on benchmarking and, what's actually going on in the industry. And, we'll get into a few of those conversations here in a little bit. And a lot of it doesn't even have to do with marketing. It's just things you have to think about when you say, I want to grow revenue. Well, in the rental industry, there's a lot of things that come along with more revenue, and you got to really be prepared for that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of groups, just to plug Iron Pulse, a lot of the top groups that we know in the rental industry use Iron Pulse, have had great results, and definitely encourage reaching out to Don if you're interested in top tier marketing solutions for an equipment rental company, right? So I think for today's topic, though, let's talk about revenue, right? It's what everyone wants to talk about. I think the rental industry is poised for revenue growth going into next year.
Sure.
You're the marketing expert in equipment rental, so there's a big marketing component here, but it's not just marketing. So, as a rental
Mhm.
company is finishing the year, we're at the end of the year now, and we're looking at 2026. Talk to me about what I need to be thinking about if I want to grow my revenue next year.
Great question. It's on top of everybody's mind. How do we get more revenue? But it's also super important to figure out where your optimization levels are for the amount of business that you actually have. How much more business can you bring on that your shop can support? Right. So if you are bringing on another $500,000 or even $100,000 of revenue, can your shop support that? Are you going to have to increase your overtime for your technicians to be able to handle that increase in demand? And then are you just spending an increase in marketing dollars to get more revenue just to have it go out the shop door because you're paying more in labor to turn that equipment because you're renting off the pickup board. So there's a lot of metrics that come into it. And just saying that you want to grow revenue is great. That's a really good goal, but you got to make sure that the infrastructure behind that is ready for it. Um, there's a lot of blocking and tackling that goes along with marketing. You got to be really good at the basics. If you look at any good NFL team, college team, whoever your team is, they got to be good at the basics before they start running the trick plays. And there's a lot of trick plays out there. There's a lot of shortcuts that are promised, but consistency is really the blocking and tackling of the marketing world. So if you continue to do the basics and get really good at those, then you can go in and venture into other routes of marketing that may be a little bit more speculative, but have a bit of a higher return in the grand scheme of things. But you also have to make sure that you're running the equipment business to be able to handle that. So what's your capex look like for next year? What type of fleet mix are you going to be buying or selling? Are you picking up a new line that you may be a dealer for? So there's a lot of questions that you would want to answer or at least plan for to be able to adjust whatever your marketing budget is. It could be a couple grand a month. It could be 20,000 a month. Who knows? Whatever your size company is, you just have to be able to spend that money in the right areas. If you're going to invest heavily in certain fleet categories, then you need to make sure you adjust your marketing accordingly.
Hmm. So, what are some of those blocking and tackling,
Yeah.
consistency, basics things to get right before we get to the trick plays? What are the things that, like,
Yeah.
if I'm a rental company, we've talked to some last week, they don't do any marketing at all, and they've been 30 plus years, all repeat business, and you just got to feel like, they really want to grow, 20, 30% next year, and they're not doing any marketing. You got to, and I'm like, man, if you do anything here, you're going to see
Hmm.
some lift here, right? So, like, for the rental companies who aren't even thinking about marketing holistically, what are the basics to get right going into next year?
Well, here's the cool thing. Most of the folks that are running rental systems, much like yours, you have reporting, right? So you can see past revenue. You can see who rented from you, who bought from you. Forget about all the fancy marketing stuff for a minute and think about the conversations you have with a company that's been in business 25, 30 years that built their reputation through customers and relationships. That's a big part of our business. There's no doubt, and it's going to continue even in this new age of technology, right? But what you can do right now is say, hey, listen, our track loaders are lowly utilized at the moment. Here's a list of everybody that's rented a track loader from us in the last 24 months. Mr. Counterfolk or Mrs. Counterfolk, I want you to just call and ask them how they're doing. See if there's anything that we can help with, right? So you have the data of the folks that are clearly in the business to rent something, and you already have folks on staff that can pick up the phone and call them. And turns out if you call 100 or 200 people and ask them to rent from you, you're probably going to get a few rentals. It may not be that day, it may not be that next week, but hey, I got a job coming up in a couple months. I'm going to need XYZ. And, do you think you can help me out with that? Absolutely. Let's put it on the books, right?
Hmm.
So, from a marketing perspective, that you kind of take it, from your sales brain and say, hey, we've already got this data, we've already got customers, why don't we just call them and ask them what's going on? Okay, so that's one. The next one is you can do some sort of a email campaign, right? Everybody's email box is full to the brim. I get it. Your click through rates are going to be pretty low. I understand that as well. But if you design your campaigns or even just a one off email from someone in the business that your customer knows, and you send them a personal email about how are you doing? Here we are, we're growing, and we'd love to do business with you. You're going to get a percentage of folks that read it, respond, and get a top of mind. Right? Rental is you're fishing with a cast net, not necessarily a spear gun. Right? So um, the amount of times that you're reaching out to this folks doesn't need to be you don't need to call them 5 times a week, right? But you need to make sure, see how it's going. You get market research that way. You understand what's going on. If you're feeling a pullback in the industry or the business, talk to your customers about it.
Hmm.
See what they're saying. Maybe there's some legal stuff going around in your municipality that's causing permits to be delayed, whatever it may be, and get their feedback. You're gonna get requests for machines that you don't have. Well, keep a log of it. And if you continue to get that request, well, maybe we need to put that in the capex plan for next year to buy a few of those machines, right? So everything I mentioned there, you can already do today, and it's not really going to cost you any money because you're already spending it. Now, when you look into what are the next components, well, you got to pass the eye test, right? So if somebody hasn't heard of you before, they're going to go and look on the web. I mean, that's just that's the world we're in. They're going to call their buddies, ask where they rent their equipment. And if you're top of mind, even if they say, "Hey, I go to Joe's Rental," and even though they got a recommendation, they're still going to check you out on the web. They're going to search you. They're going to see what they find. They're going to land on your website if it looks presentable and you've got some content that it looks like you have what they need. They're going to give you a call. So passing the eye test is part of that blocking and tackling. A part of that is having an updated Google Business profile. That's just the world we live in. There's no way around it. There's a monopoly on that. So if you search Google, you got to have an updated Google Business profile, or you're not going to be found. And you've got to spend some time on getting some of those customer reviews. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? So if you continue to add positive customer reviews to your profile, people are going to see that, and it's going to give you that inherent trust that you are a trustworthy company. So you do that when you start a business. You do that if you've been in business 30 years. That's just something that you have to do. Now, when you go further into that, okay, well, now we passed the eye test. We're being, somebody can see our website. They can see that we have an active Google business page. How do we get more people to see that? Well, there's, quite a few different ways to do that. Search engine optimization. I know you've had some folks on here that have talked about that before. You don't have to get crazy with it. You just need to pay attention to what the best practices are for your website in order to be found. It's a very difficult thing to do,
Yeah.
especially in a crowded space, to be able to rank for certain key terms in the areas that you're in. That's a part of the consistency that you have to do on a regular basis, right? You can supplement that with paid ads. So if you're not getting the SEO traffic that you're looking for, you supplement that with paid ads, right? So you look into the terms that you need for qualified traffic, and they find your website, and then eventually convert into a qualified lead, right? So those are just a couple of the basics.
Yeah. Well, thanks for going through that. So to recap, first thing you should do, look at your data and just call your customers. Hey, how's it going? I haven't heard from you in a while. Like, anybody can do that, right? And every software has that data, right? Um, Secondly, email campaigns. I know there's a trillion of them. There's a reason there's a trillion of them is because they don't cost any money to send and they work. It's definitely a shotgun approach. Send 100, maybe you get 5 open and 2 rentals, but there's no cost to that. So just doing general email campaigns, right? Third, the eye test, right? So having a strong web presence, obviously you got to serve your customers well. People talk, so you have to be able to be seen in your market. Google reviews and Google My Business is like a must have. I have a friend who's got a physical therapy company in Atlanta. He started it here. It was going well. All of a sudden, business fell off by 60%. Couldn't figure out why. His Google My Business page got taken down because of an address dispute. And a month later, it went by. He got it back up. Business went back up. And it's crazy not having a Google business. If you don't have a Google My Business, you're definitely in a bad spot. You got to get that set up. But then the reviews, there's all these studies. You need regular reviews, 5-star, 4-star reviews. You need to respond back to those reviews.
Mhm.
There's ways to do it. Like, there's software out there. Your rental software should have it at the end. You should be prompting automatically for people. You should be asking customers to leave reviews. It's not that hard, but you do have to spend the time to do it. And it's so important. Um, and then the last thing here, kind of wrapping up like core, getting into basic / intermediate marketing is, SEO and paid ads. And they both work together, right? SEO is the long long tail paying dividends over a long period of time, and paid ads get you the juice right away. Um, and on the paid ads, like there's different ways, right? You could just do generic equipment rental near me, but some of the groups we've talked to is every week they'll look at and go, "Hey, I'm I've got underutilization on skid steers. I'm going to prompt those ads, right?" And you can use your utilization
Hmm.
data to be more hyper specific around the types of rentals you're trying to push. So uh, those are all important things. And I would say not every rental company does those things, right? But I think before we get into the trick play stuff,
Hmm.
those are like must have for any company who wants to grow into next year.
Well, they are, but when you look at your fleet mix and you look at the the investments that you have in each equipment category, it the time utilization is one thing, but also look at the profit margin on your dollar
Yeah.
ute, right? So even if you have a less amount of money invested in one particular equipment class, if you're making double the amount of money on that machine because it's you pay it off in 5 rental cycles, let's push that, right? Let's
Yeah.
get more of those because typically the smaller equipment's going to be easier to haul around, to service, to name something, right? Um, so really taking advantage of the machines that give you that higher dollar ute is something that you really need to look at in addition to the time utilization.
Yeah, exactly. Not all revenue is created equal, and there's different. You think about profit. We all talk about revenue, but at the end of the day, we got to generate profit, right? Um,
Hmm.
Tell me about some of the trick plays. Yeah, I got the basics down. I'm a good rental company. Got all these down. What are some of the trick plays I could run by myself, or maybe bring in a consultant, an expert to help me run?
Oh man, so I'm not going to call this a trick play. I'm just going to call this thinking of marketing in a broader sense, right? So, as we know, the relationship business is huge in the rental industry, right? So, what are you doing in addition? Think about the things that you're doing. So, if you have a trade association that is in your area, are you
Okay.
spending time with that? How are you doing it? So, are you just a paper member? Do you just want to be listed on their website and have a link back to your business? That's okay, right? Are you just going to the free mixers on Tuesday nights and hopefully, meet with all the other sales reps that are in the area? Or are you actually investing some time, I call it sweat equity, into that association to help all of the trade members, um, you know, get into their cause and actually help them accomplish things in the industry that they need done? The sweat equity is the plan that you have to take into those associations, right? So let's say you have your staff and you have a sales guy or even a counter person or your general manager, and they want to be involved in this association. Let's say it costs you $1,000 a year. Okay, I'm going to chalk that up to marketing, right? So that's a
Yep.
marketing cost. We're there because we want to eventually get business. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. You might get some one-offs that need some equipment to give you a shot, but consistency, if we go back to that, is the same in the association world. So if you're there, if you go to the meetings, if you join a committee, those are the things that build that trust within the organization. And then eventually you just become that name in that area for the equipment rental for that group of folks. But you can't just do it without a plan.
Yeah.
So if you have a general manager or sales rep or a counter employee that thinks it's a good idea to invest into an association membership, come up with a plan. Say, hey, listen, I want you to get involved. Hey, these next few months, go to these events. That's great. Maybe we'll sponsor, their golf tournament or whatever they have. Those aren't necessarily going to bring you a bunch of leads. Just know that if you write them a check, it's probably not going to happen at least the first few times. But if that person is involved and they get in on those committees, they eventually become a committee chair. The committee chair gets invited to be on the board position, and now you're at the right table and you have a say in what's going on. And people
Mm.
can trust that you have the interest in the industry at the forefront of your mind, rather than just being there as a sales rep trying to get more business. So I don't call that a necessarily a trick play, but that's definitely one that you need to think about if you are spending money on those particular types of events. Um,
Well, I
Another
was just
one
saying here,
that you can, yeah, go ahead.
was gonna say real quick, it's interesting. It's refreshing to hear from a marketing person who runs a lot of digital marketing. They say you should be in the field building relationships. because a lot of market people say, "Hey, you
Oh yeah.
spend more money on Google ads or Facebook ads." And I think Elliot Vigil said, I'm going to butcher the quote, but people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's not just writing the check for the golf tournament, but it's showing up
Mhm.
and being involved
That's
and
right.
trying to add value, right? And that doesn't take that's not one golf check and one sponsorship. It's consistency, right? You started off at the beginning, consistency, showing up, being involved, helping, serving. That's what we're talking about here, right? So I just want to acknowledge Elliot and those thoughts there.
Yeah, between what you and Elliot have done for the industry, let's just pull back and pat you guys on the back. The amount of micro learning that you guys have provided for this industry is a great thing, and we all appreciate it. I like your listening to the episodes with the wide range of folks that you have. It allows folks to just open up their mind, think of something in a different way, and you're never going to be credited with success of somebody that heard something from your podcast that put it into play because that's just the way the internet works, right? But having a platform to be able to do something like this, if somebody can just change one little thing in their business once a month to actually drive more success, I think that's what you guys are doing, and proud to be part of that.
Yeah. Well, Elliot's got
Excuse
the
me.
actual thought leadership. I just had the people listen. I just listened to the people coming on. So
Yeah.
difference between me and Elliot. But get back to so showing up for your community. What else are some of the things to think about for next year?
Yep. So take this into thought. So most folks have like a voice over IP system on their phones, right?
Yeah.
So they can pretty much run reporting on how many phone calls they got for their business, or if they have multiple locations, how many calls they got per store.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of a fun thing to look at, but I'm not going to say it's it's written in stone that it's exactly how the metric works. But if you can look at your branch and see how many phone calls you got within a year, and then correlate that to the amount of revenue that store drove. Easy numbers. Let's say you got $1 million in revenue and you had X amount of phone calls for that store for the year. You can actually calculate out how many dollars each phone call was worth to that business, right?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
when that when that phone rings, hey, that might be $4, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
from an internal marketing standpoint, that's super important to make sure people understand how important the phone is. And I just use the term internal marketing. I'm going to call this a trick play, right? This isn't. I'm not going to say, hey, this digital piece, this new software that runs all this AI is going to get you all the new business in the world. No, it might in the future, and I support that. But if you get your teams together and you do some sales and marketing training for everybody in the organization, I mean, that's a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
How many times can you go into your shop and get your technicians and say, "Hey, do you know who our core customer base is?"
Mm.
And a lot of times they're going to say, "Well, no, I fix these machines, but I don't necessarily know who rents them." Right?
Mm.
Birds of a feather kind of flock together, right? So they know a lot of people in the industry. They know a lot of people in their personal network that are in the trades. And if they know exactly who you guys are going after and what you are really good at, that's internal marketing. You got to tell them what's going on and what's important to you as the business owner. And, ultimately how you are supporting the business by doing marketing, but also investing your time into that group to understand exactly who we are. I know a lot of companies out there do this, but there's a lot of companies that don't, and it's super important.
Mm.
Does it need to be a 3-hour training on how to soft close somebody? Absolutely not. But does your driver that goes out and touches every job site in your area need to know exactly what it is you guys do on a regular basis that you are the best at? 100%.
Mm.
Those delivery drivers, your technicians, those are the ones that your customers ultimately would actually trust the most. If you have a sales team out in the field,
Yeah.
they know they're compensated on getting more machines out, and they'll probably say things I'm not going to say they're going to lie, but they'll definitely inflate things to get the business. But when that customer goes and talks to your driver, hey man, how are things going? Hey, do you like that Bobcat T590 with the high flow? What do you think about that? And they'll start talking machinery. And if that guy gives him a recommendation and says, hey man, we just got this new line, you really need to check this out, he's probably going to, just because he has that level of trust. That
Mm,
driver and that mechanic, their hard hats are beat up. They got stickers on them. Their boots are scuffed up. Those are the ones that they trust because they know they're in the business. So, from a marketing guy perspective, that is super important. Digital marketing can get you new customers, they can get you new people to talk to. But everybody on this podcast would know that if you fall on your face with a late delivery, if your machine goes hard down and you don't have you don't swap it out, or you don't have a tech to come out and fix it, you're not going to
yeah,
get the second chance, right? And so everything that I'm talking about today all works together. So if the customer calls you and says, hey, I need another one of those boom lifts, and you're running off of the pickup line just because your capex wasn't where it needed to be the previous year, that's a challenge, because then they're going to go somewhere else. We're in the commodity business. It's who has it, who has the best rate, and who can get it to me before my job starts, or so I can go into this next phase. So from a marketing perspective, all of those things are super important.
yeah. Well, I think it's interesting is, if you have 20 people at your rental company, you got one salesperson, and like that guy is responsible for sales. It's like, no, the whole company is responsible for growth together, right? And it starts with
Hmm.
service of the customer. But like when your driver is talking about the latest equipment that came in, they need to be well versed and be able to, not that they need to be a salesperson, but could you lead with how do we help? How do we help? Right. And if you do that over time, there will be opportunities, these natural opportunities. I started the conversation with the rental company I talked to. It's been 30 years, no ads, no marketing, and it continues to grow.
Yep.
You know, they grow because they have great customer service and they take care of their customers. My
Sure.
point is, man, could you layer on some marketing on top of that, some icing, and then you could really grow. But like,
Yeah.
you got to have both together. If you just had great marketing and your procedures broke down and you didn't serve customers well and you didn't answer the
Yep.
phone, it doesn't really matter, right? So you got to have the underlying core business that works. And what I like we said there is instilling that culture for the entire organization, right? That to have more of a growth, revenue, sales mindset. Not that they need to be salespeople with the best closing pitch of all time, but
Mm.
having that orientation about who the customer is and making sure you're serving them well.
Yeah, the term is the buyer persona. Who's your
Hmm.
customer? I've heard a few of your guests talked about that. Your ownership and your counters are probably going to know who that is, but as you trickle through the business of everybody, that's super important for that sale life cycle. It's important for them to know. So paying attention to uh, what's called the rental prevention division.
Yeah.
A lot of people have this division that's really big, and they don't even know why they have it. So if you go through and actually map out every touch that has to happen in order for a rental to get out into the field, there's a lot, and that's why this business is difficult. There's a lot of things that go into play there. So mapping that out and figuring out where the hiccups are.
Yeah.
Pretend to be a customer, figure out where the hiccups are, and you fix those. And from a marketing perspective, that's the best marketing you can do,
Yeah.
because they're going to tell people about it, right? But if you take the other pieces of marketing, the digital marketing buzz term is huge just because of the way the internet is. But that's a supplement to everything else that you do. So when you're clicking along and spending time on all of these different items, that's where the consistency pays off, and that's where you're continue to grow in the future, to invest in the right areas when it comes to your marketing and sales.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you going through all this. We said 6 or 7 things. I'm sure you got another dozen we could keep going through. But I want to wrap things up here.
Yep.
Say we picked out my 3 or 4 things I want to implement going in 2026. How do I build a plan? How do I stay on track? Because all these are great ideas, but obviously it's all around execution. So, how do you think about the accountability and actually sticking to the plan?
Yep. So what's more important, the idea or the execution, right? They're both equally as important. You got to have 20 ideas to get a good one, and then when you
Yeah.
execute it, and then it works, right? That's any business owner. So thinking about really going into the next year. And this is what I did when I, was in the business, in the field, understanding what we should do from a marketing perspective for each branch is what's the fleet mix look like? That's where I always start. Where are we at? Are we defleeting? Are we increasing? Are we pivoting? Are we opening up a greenfield somewhere that we need to pay attention to? What's that going to look like? And then you build it in backwards to understand what level of revenue that we want to expect. And then we figure out what type of activity that we need on the top end of the funnel to go all the way down to the bottom to increase that revenue. Now, then when you find the revenue number, you got to build in your metrics behind the scenes to make sure your shop and all of the operations can keep up with that. But from a perspective from marketing per se, let's say you come up with a good number. Everybody asks me and say, hey, what percentage of my revenue should I be spending on marketing? Everybody on this, listening to this knows that there's not one answer for that. Everybody runs their business differently. If you look into the books from what Red Bull spends on their marketing versus another competitor,
Yeah.
it's 80-90% of their revenue goes into marketing.
Mm.
And, from a rental company perspective, sometimes it might be 1 or 2%, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it really depends on what works for the type of business that you're in and also how competitive your markets are. Some markets are going to be more expensive. You might have a ton of nationals running around with unlimited budgets that are driving up the cost of your online ads. Or you might be in a kind of a rural area that you do have to spend some money in, but you're going to have less competition. So you may be able to get a large percentage of that search market in the area. But when I look at marketing from an overall perspective, how much are we going to spend on machine stickers? Right? In a grand scheme of thing, that's branding,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
What are we going to do? If you're stickering a large number of machines, it gets pretty expensive. So a couple of accounting decisions. Do you cap that cost to each machine? Are they worth it? You know, the way to prove that is to put a trackable number on the sticker. How many people call us because of our sticker?
Mm.
Well, nowadays, most people won't call. They'll just look you up. If they see Kyle Rental there, they're just going to search Kyle Rental and see what pops up. You can sticker $100 million worth of machines and have a unique number and get a very few amount of people call you.
Mm.
So it's really just paying attention to the amount of dollars that go into your association memberships that I
Mhm.
consider marketing, your stickers, all of that. How many hats are you going to do? Do you have a hat trade program, right?
Yeah.
If you see somebody coming in your store with a competitive hat, say, hey, I got a brand new one right here. I'll trade you. Right. So they're little things like that, but they all add up. So
Mhm.
you need to try to account for that. Is it going to be 100% ironclad that you keep with your plan throughout the entire year? Absolutely not. Things are going to happen, right?
Mm.
So you have to at least have a plan that you're going to try to stick to. These are my core important things that you need to consistently do. And then as things comes up, have some areas of flexibility when it comes to your budget to go out and try and see how they do.
Yeah. It may not be 100% ironclad, but it can be 100% iron pulse. How's that for a slogan?
Oh, man,
How's
new
that for
marketing guy.
marketing?
Woo!
I'm the marketing guy.
Goodness
And,
gracious.
and some of the things that, if you do put stickers on your equipment, you could have other phone numbers that are like redirects so you could track that, or even KyleRental.com, and maybe you have the websites get.kylerental.com, and like then
Sure.
you can start to attribute it. It's not
Mhm.
perfect, but things like that. And when you talk about the hats, I think about Rodney Coker when he came on. I think he ordered like 3,000 hats, and he was like, "It's the best marketing." But you got to be authentic to yourself, right? So some people are like fully digital, whatever. And some people are like, I'm going to be at every trade show in the world, and that's what I like to do. And some guys, I got
Hmm.
hats and a really cool brand, and my brand's going to be out there. And
Yep.
there's not a silver bullet. It sort of also comes back to what do you want and how do you want to show up and make sure it's authentic to who you are, right?
That's the name of the game, man. Just keep sticking to it, and consistency is going to pay off in the long run. And as you continue to talk to more rental companies or dealerships that have been in the industry for a long time, and you ask them what they did, and they stayed true to their word, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah. Well, Don, thank you for coming on again a second time. I guess final piece of advice as you think about giving advice to a rental company trying to grow revenue in 2026 as a priority, what's one thing you'd say to leave behind here today?
Yep. Take these next couple months. I know, it's going to be busy with the holidays and all the kids stuff and, everything that we got to cram into the end of the
Yeah.
year with your books and accounting. But, take a minute and actually put down on paper, what you're actually doing from a marketing standpoint. And then see how that's going to match up to what you're looking at doing for the following year. And when those two start to align, that's when it really starts to be most effective, right? So,
Yeah.
keep your thoughts down. Reach out to somebody. It doesn't have to be me, but if you are working with somebody, just hold them accountable to understanding the business of the equipment rental industry as well as you can. I recommend not having to teach them the business, but ask the right questions. Bring up your fleet and say, hey, listen, I've got $1 million tied into this category. What are we doing specifically to get these machines out in the field? Help me understand how we can do that. Here are my customers. Here's the base that we're doing. I'm looking into this type of equipment category. Can
Yeah.
we run some sort of a report on the search demand in my area for this particular type? And, if we do go into that, from a significant money investment, what can we do to increase the amount of activity we get from that? And once you start having those conversations, that's when your marketing's really going to be most efficient because now you're aligned with whoever you're working with, either as a contract marketing company or somebody internally that may have one or two other hats that they wear. But you've got to be aligned with what you're looking to do because if not, you're always going to be frustrated with spending a marketing dollar if
Hmm.
those two people are not aligned.
That's great. Well, Don, thank you for all the advice here today and thoughts, and excited for 2026 for the
Yep.
rental industry. Seems like it's poised for growth. And thank you again, Don, for being a great guest here today.
Yes, sir. Take care.